So here's the thing about Diane Nguyen from Bojack Horseman. She is an extremely complex, layered person who kind of gets shat on the internet. Way more than she should. I don't know if you guys have engaged with the Bojack dialogue much online, but some of the rhetoric used toward her is particularly vicious, as opposed to other characters, whereas Bojack sometimes will get 1 million passes when he is clearly a little bit more problematic than she is. You know what? I think I might know why that is, at least partially. Sexism. It's not entirely why people dislike Diane. She obviously makes numerous glaring errors, but still, she isn't Bojack level awful, in my opinion. She isn't very good to Mr. Peanutbutter in their relationship. Actually, she's downright horrible to him at times, but, you know, it's not a good relationship on both sides. And she isn't malicious. She tries to live her life as a good person by societal standards, sometimes going overboard to do so, but still, she's often given much more hate than she deserves, so I wanted to dive into some of the reasons that fuel that overblown hate. Number 1, Diane is a very outspoken character. She always has to have an opinion on something, and when she does, she has to state it to others. Characters like that are often not very well liked, because their personalities are often clouded over by their very, very loud opinions.
You should probably just drop this.
Oh, I'm gonna drop it all right. They don't even know how much I'm gonna drop it.
I feel like Diane often uses political or social issues to distract from her own personal issues, like when her and Mr. Peanutbutter argue on the news over political differences and then use the hate to fuel angry sex because both of them are unhappy in the relationship. Or when she's arguing with Guy about feeling happy and she says that it must be nice for him to be able to feel that way while the world's burning. I love that he erupts saying, this is not even about the world.
This is about you and me.
Because he's right, like, girl, he just gave you a coat. What the fuck are you talking about? And Guy is right in this scene in that she kind of uses this to punish herself and almost doesn't allow herself to feel good or enjoy her life. It's like a layer she puts over herself. A very thick, very loud layer. Whatever way she brings these things up, people who are always unhappy, always complaining about the world around them, they're tough to be around, and I can understand why some of the audience would be annoyed by this. Again, not really me. She calls out other characters for her bullshit too, especially Bojack, and as he's the main character, it can sometimes almost make her feel like an antagonist for some people, even though she really is an advocate for these other characters and is good friends. I actually really appreciate her and Princess Carolyn's friendship in particular. I feel like in season 6, the advice that Princess Carolyn gives her about the book is just so wonderful and was a really nice moment to see between them because we don't really get that many moments between them. But she's only hard on